welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed it, top gold, silver, and crypto stories for the week ended July 1st, 2018. Turmoil to come this summer? Well, let's take a look at some of the headlines we're going to be covering. Battle over the border. Supreme Court may cause turmoil. Supreme Court rules on the travel ban and unions. Justice Kennedy to resign. Rosenstein and Wray testify before Congress. Senator Warner hints something big may be coming in the Mueller probe. China collapse. Have the gold pumpers figured out that that might be good for gold? And gold and silver fall further during the week, and cryptos rebound. Let's get to some of the top stories, but before we do that, let's just cover some of the Smaulgld activity and then the gold and silver prices and crypto prices during the week. Well, I was on Silver Fortune during the week with Matt from Silver Fortune, and we discussed how much gold does China really have. So you can check that out. There's a blog post, and also you can check out the YouTube directly on the Smaulgld blog post, or you can head on over to the Silver Fortune channel and check out this blog post, this YouTube, and also all the other work that Matt does at Silver Fortune. So please go check that out. During the week, as I mentioned, Trump has announced that he will be making his choice to replace Anthony Kennedy. We're getting ahead of ourselves here, but on July 9th. So they're going to move quickly, and they will probably try to, or definitely try to, have this Supreme Court nominee approved before the November elections. Just a quick whatever happened to the Clinton Foundation. Remember all that essential work that they were doing? Just seems to have stopped. All right, so otherwise at Smaulgld, we have done a lot of work during the week, because not only did we keep up with the regular blog posting, or who's we, with the regular blog posting and YouTube pre-recorded channels, we've been doing a live stream every night. So we've covered topics from is owning assets a good idea, what the Russia's gold purchases and treasury dumps mean for the dollar, why an economic boom may be great for gold and silver. I challenge we, along with the people that follow along, the conventional wisdom that there's going to be a dollar collapse and that may be good for gold and silver. We ask what happens in an economic boom or just general good economic times. Does that mean that gold is destined to go down if we don't have some sort of collapse? We also asked whether a Chinese collapse may be more likely, and maybe that might be good for gold as well. So plenty of thought-provoking series of YouTubes during the week. Let's see, Kazakhstan rolled ahead of the United Kingdom and is now the 15th largest central bank gold holding nation, and they have 314 tons. And in fact, I just got their May numbers, and they added another 4 tons, so they're now at 318. We'll put out a story on that later in the week. We did a story on crypto how it could lead to a surge, or has been leading to a surge, in gold and silver jewelry buying at a high-end jewelry store in Silicon Valley. I expect to see more of that if cryptos remain elevated and it becomes a preferred means of payment. We discussed monetary policy stimulus versus fiscal policy stimulus. We even covered why the Trump travel ban was upheld by the Supreme Court. We did a legal analysis of that case. And we asked whether a gold standard makes sense today, and we went through the classical gold standard from the late 19th century all the way through to 1914-15, and then we covered the Bretton Woods standard, and then we discussed what types of gold standards, if any, or perhaps gold trade notes relating to individual transactions might make sense today. Also, Salivate Metal. He covered the blog post and YouTube that I had done, how a booming economy could lead to higher gold and silver prices. So be sure to check out his thoughts on that particular topic over at Salivate Metal. I want to express a multitude of gratitude. For those of you who don't know Salivate Metal, you should check him out. He's over on YouTube under Salivate Metal, and that was my poor imitation of him. But you can go over there, you'll hear a distinct vocal quality from Mr. Salivate Metal. Then I did another YouTube or live stream, not as popular because it goes against the traditional wisdom. A lot of people don't like when you mention that maybe their narratives are incorrect. A lot of gold people have their hearts set on, and they have this myth that China is going to crush the dollar, and China's got gold, and China knows everything, and United States is a bunch of dummies and they don't get gold. And well, anyway, I covered that fairly extensively in a recent live stream. I think it was 2 nights ago, and you could check that one out. I called it China to crush itself instead of China to crush the dollar, talking about their massive debt Ponzi scheme that I believe they have running. All right, what else did we do? End of the petrodollar. I did another follow-up on that, the difference between the petrodollar with Saudi Arabia and now backed by U.S. oil as well, and also the petro yuan, as I call it. All right, so that's it for Smaulgld. Well, that's a lot, but you can check it out. That's why I produce this weekly update, so you can go back and check out what you missed. If you go to the Smaulgld website, you can see the commentary, not just the blog post, but you can check out the charts as well. And please remember to subscribe to the Smaulgld channel. Also subscribe to the Smaulgld blog as well. Now, gold closed the week down again at 1252, although it was below the psychological 1250 mark on Thursday. It did close up on Friday over 1250. Silver had dipped below $16 on Thursday, closed down the week at 1609 from 1642. The gold-silver ratio looks like it's crept back up after hitting a bit of a low in around June 23rd, or really June 18th, at about 75 to 1. It's back up to around 78 to 1. All right, let's check out the stories of the week. By the way, I'm going to be we're selling Smaulgld mugs. On the left is your Smaulgld Classic mug, and then your Smaulgld Super Classic mug, which is a little more refined there. It's the perfect thing for you to have when you are sitting down to listen to a Smaulgld YouTube or just to check out the website. You can have your Smaulgld mug right there in front of you, and they'll be reasonably priced, so I'll let you know when they become available for sale. Trump gave a rally in South Carolina, and again, he gave this similar rally in, I think it was North Dakota, Fargo, North Dakota, and he renamed his deplorables super elites and mocked the elites by saying that first in South Carolina, he said he was smarter and richer than they were, and then what he did, realizing that might be a little bit too egotistical, not that that's ever bothered him in the past, but that he called his supporters the super elites. Well, the Atlanta GDP now, at one point over the last couple of weeks, was about 4.7%. The projection for the second quarter is now down to 4.5%, but that's still pretty high, highest in years. And also, the first quarter, though, however, was reduced downward. So we'll see how the second quarter comes in. Generally, what happens with the Atlanta Fed is that it rises. It starts off the beginning of the quarter high, and then it falls. In this case, it actually rose during the quarter and has only recently fallen off. But let's see. All right. Now let's get to the Supreme Court. We covered this briefly, but one of the rulings, and it involved Justice Kennedy, who was in the 5-4 majority. All 3 major decisions that the Supreme Court ruled on the past week in the final term had Justice Kennedy in the majority. The reason that the Democrats and the left are upset at Justice Kennedy leaving and Trump getting a new pick is that he has been, in about 20-25% of the cases, a swing vote over to the left side. So he has ruled with the left occasionally, but on some big ticket items like same-sex marriage. What they're concerned about now is that if Trump gets a replacement, the court will move further to the right, and the new judge will no longer be the swing vote. It'll probably be somebody maybe like the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice. So who knows what will happen, but it looks like Trump already has a 25-person list, and I think the concern is for the left that all of them have expressed in some way, shape, or form some type of animus towards the Roe versus Wade decision. That doesn't mean that's the first thing they're going to do when they get it is try to overrule it. But that decision, and they know this, is on sketchy constitutional grounds. It has nothing to do with whether you believe in a woman's right, whatever your beliefs are on the abortion issue, I'm just talking legally, that case is very, very weak. They invented rights, penumbra of rights. There's nothing in the Constitution that talks about it. They strain to get a result. And that's what you'll see in the 4 justices that now make up the minority on the Supreme Court. Sotomayor, Kagan, Ginsburg. They often want a result, and so they just strive to get there whether or not it complies with matching a statute up with the Constitution or not. They basically will bring in extraneous information. They will just put in their opinion and try to get the rest of the court to agree with them. And that is not what Donald Trump's vision of the Supreme Court is. It's not really a right versus left, but it does tend to be that the people on the right are more in favor of a strict reading of the Constitution than those on the left. But those on the left, because they know that the Constitution restrains them, so they don't like when people just want to stick to what's in the Constitution. It's very similar to monetary policy as well. Conservatives tend to want to have a balanced budget on fiscal side, and they don't want the central bank, if they might not even want a central bank at all, but if they're going to have a central bank, they don't want them trying to create a result and manage the economy. Whereas those on the left tend to believe in a more progressive monetary policy. They believe in stimulus both on the fiscal side and on the monetary side. Trump has been showing that he is essentially behaving as a conservative on the legal side. Now, as to the the monetary side, he really doesn't have much of a say. Supposedly, the Fed is independent. On the fiscal side, it's hard to say whether he's governing as a strict conservative or whether he is actually a progressive, because while he cut taxes, which is something that the progressives generally don't like to do because they like to have tax money so they can do their government spending, Trump didn't cut government spending, he just cut taxes, which is interesting because he's kind of in the middle there. Generally, a conservative fiscal policy would be you try to balance the budget. You may cut taxes or you may not, but you clearly would cut spending and you cut the size of government. Now, what Trump has done is he has cut a lot of regulations. Now, I have not seen, nor has he given any detail, nor have I investigated, but he claims he's cut so many regulations, and I don't know which ones he's cut, how many he's cut, and what the overall impact that is on the budget. Because obviously, if you cut regulations, you need fewer people to administer those regulations. So we'll see what happens. Now, the Supreme Court with the union, this was a big deal, and I'm surprised that it ever passed. This is the public unions. They had been charging people that work for the government, I think it's in Illinois, union due fees, even if they're not in the union. And they basically said in a 5-4 decision recently, they overruled a prior decision that said that they can't do that because it violated their First Amendment rights, their freedom of association. Like, if I don't want to be in the union, why do you make me be in the union? Why do you take my money? Now, I would have thought that they would have instead of done it, the case on the First Amendment, which is the freedom of association, I would have thought, if I was the jurist, I would have said it was a taking without due process under the 14th Amendment, because they just take your money. Even before they tell you you have to associate, they haven't asked, that you've gone through no ability to say, I don't want you to take my money. They haven't been able to make their case to you why they want to take your money, and you haven't been able to plead your case why they shouldn't take your money, and they just took it. But in any event, that's gone down in flames, and it's now a 5-4 decision. The significance of that is that those union dues often funded many left-wing and democratic causes, directly and indirectly. So the reason the title of this video is Turmoil to Come This Summer, or something along those lines, Turmoil to Come This Summer, is that is a blow to fundraising. It is a blow, it is seen, to just unionizing in general. The travel ban was also overruled. So now the left and the Democrat are fired up that Trump really is now pushing forward his agenda. They had expected him probably not to be able to do so. They were probably surprised at the tax cuts that they went through, and now they're promising to reverse those. I'm not sure how popular that will be, but clearly they have struck a nerve with the border and the separation of children at the border, and so that is going to be a hot button issue that's gotten people riled up. And the idea that Trump will pick another Supreme Court justice, and probably one more, because we expect Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg also to retire at some point, maybe not before 2020, but probably before 2024 if Trump were to be elected, and that would tip the court in favor 6-3. And that, of course, would be a disaster, because what the left is concerned about is that Roe versus Wade is going to get overturned, and even perhaps they're worried that the same-sex marriage may be overturned as well. I think that case is on more solid grounds, because if the government is going to offer rights and benefits to those that are married, but they restrict it to male and female, there's a sounder legal argument for gay marriage getting the recognition by the government. If you're going to recognize one, then the logic goes you have to recognize the other. But the idea that a woman has a right to an abortion based on a penumbra of rights emanating from the Bill of Rights, that's what they call legal fiction. They just made that up. They made that up in order to get a result, just like they made up that Obamacare was a tax when it wasn't, in order, because they were concerned, and Justice Roberts admitted this, that would have been a disaster if they didn't want to seem like he was playing politics. But if the law gives a result, it gives a result. It's not the job of the Supreme Court justice or any justice to determine what the impact is going to be. That's something that is up to the legislature to figure out how they want to deal with it. Because if they had wanted to make that a tax in the beginning, they would have made it a tax. But that's not what they did. All right, so Kennedy's gone, and Trump has said he's going to replace him. That's got people riled up. Now, I had mentioned long, long ago when Trump first got elected, I thought that Trump would be good for gold. Remember, one of the reasons that people buy gold is insurance against financial calamity, political uncertainty, and so on. And I thought, well, Trump was, and so did most people, because that Trump would be a wild card and there'd be a lot of political uncertainty, and that would drive the price of gold higher. And that was the initial thought that people had. The stock market went down. Our friend, Nobel Prize winner Krugman, said the stock market will never recover. Gold went soaring within hours of the time that it looked like Trump was going to win. And that all reversed itself, and the stock market went higher. Gold went higher during Brexit, but basically since 2016 has stalled, and silver's done even worse. However, I still think that there's an opportunity for Trump turmoil, as I had termed it back in 2016, and I think this summer you may see it. I think right now, I think that the Trump opponents were counting on that people would get tired of Trump, he would be ineffective, and they'd be able to hound him out of office based on the Russian investigation and basically on what they viewed as his own incompetence. And the Russia investigation, while it has claimed a few scalps, it hasn't claimed anything near a Russian collusion narrative. And as far as I can tell, there's no way they're going to get him on obstruction of justice, because he fired Comey. He's allowed to fire Comey, but he fired him based on Rod Rosenstein's, who is the Deputy Attorney General, on his recommendation, on his memo. And Rosenstein is the one who appointed the special counsel. Well, he clearly wasn't appointing the special counsel to investigate Donald Trump's firing of FBI Director Comey. He wouldn't, on the basis of a memo that Rosenstein had written. So that wouldn't make any sense, and I don't think that's the case. And I think that narrative is going away, and the new narrative is going to be that Trump is, quote, literally Hitler, or today I saw Mussolini. So now they're, and at some point they'll probably go over to Francisco Franco. They're going to have to paint Trump out to be someone that is a significant risk and danger, thereby justifying things like surrounding the Capitol, like Michael Moore suggested the other night, and preventing the Congress from voting on a Supreme Court justice. So we're seeing now the stepping up of the rhetoric, chasing people out of restaurants. There was a Washington Post editorial saying we have to do this types of thing. So we're going to see that, I think, this summer. Whether it'll be a very pivotal moment if indeed we get through the summer and there's no change. So there's a couple of scenarios. If you get through the summer and they manage to get through a new Supreme Court justice that is not favorable to the Democrats or the left, and if you don't get any real change in the congressional or Senate makeup, meaning the Republicans hold on to both, well, then I think it's you're going to see, you'll still see the resistance, but it will start to fade, because then you will start to see an emergence of people moving over to Trump. I'm talking about at the margins, but when you have them at the margins and your approval rating is 40, 43, you get to that tipping point 50%. Now, the other scenario, and I don't think that would be good for gold. I think that would be good for the stock market. The other scenario is somehow they manage to hold off the nominee, or they delay it, and then there is this semi or big red wave, blue wave, and the Democrats gain seats and either gain the Senate, which is probably more likely than they'd have to replace a lot of House seats. But let's say they get one House or both, then you're going to have gridlock. Then you're going to have everything they resist now. They're going to have the votes to stop, and you won't get another tax cut. And then I think that might also not be a big deal for gold either, because I think you'll have some type of balance. You generally see in midterm elections the president get rebuked. And that happened to Reagan, that happened to Clinton, big time. You win, and then they say, we don't want this guy to have too much power, and then the other party picks up some seats. So I think the thing that would be good for gold, but probably not good for the country, would be probably the best scenario for turmoil is the Senate goes to 50-50 or 51-50, so something very close, but the Congress still remains Republican. And then that would mean that bills would never get passed to go to the Senate for the Democrats to even vote on with their majority if they did manage to get one. So that's probably the scenario where you're going to have this continued turmoil, and that will also further enrage the Democrats, because they won't be able to say this is all illegitimate, because they will have been somewhat rebuked in that scenario by the American public. So we'll see what happens. That's not a prediction. Those are just the scenarios that can happen. Okay, so Meadows and DeSantis and all the Republicans, they got to harangue Strzok. They also got to talk to Rosenstein and Wray during the week. They were not civil to them at all. I've covered those already. You can go back and check out the videos. Not much is going to happen there until the main takeaway there is they just basically repeated a lot was in the IG report. They don't trust Rosenstein. They want him to hand over documents. He's not handing them over. They sent him an ultimatum. He's supposed to deliver the documents next week. If not, they say they might put him in contempt of Congress, and then they might even impeach him. That's another thing that could be problematic. Trump has stayed out of this. He could clear this up with a stroke of a pen. He could just declassify the documents. Those people work for him in the Department of Justice and hand them over to Congress. But he doesn't want to do that, I guess, because he doesn't want to appear like he's interfering and perhaps even obstructing justice. So we'll see what happens there. We won't know for a week. Now, this Mark Warner thing, you didn't really hear much about this, but apparently he joked at a donor conference, a meeting with rich donors, that he appeared to be a little tipsy. He admitted, he said, give me a little more wine and I'll tell you something that's coming up that only Bob Mueller and I know. Now, why Warner would only know something that Bob Mueller would know, probably he's just trolling for campaign donations, but interesting to see that that's still a hope for the Democrats that they might be able to catch Trump on something in the Mueller probe. But then Trump pointed out that might be illegal. Probably is. I mean, to be telling, But he didn't say anything. He just said that, give me a few drinks and I might tell you, but he didn't tell them anything. And of course, Trump is following, almost as a observer, the Strzok page and all the stuff going on, or that has gone on with the FBI and the DOJ. Now, gold pumpers, as you know, the story I've been talking about all week, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it right now, but they've always talked about the collapse. The collapse is always about the dollar, and it's always about debt. I've been adding that really it's a global debt situation, not just the dollar. But finally, and I've always said that it's more likely, not always said, but I have been saying for a while, and just because I've been saying for a while doesn't make it true. When people say, I've always said, you could have always been wrong. But I've always said, or not have always said, I've said often that it's more likely that a Chinese debt collapse would be good for gold, in the sense that it might really rattle the international global markets and even the United States markets, and that would be good for gold. Well, finally, King World News, which is always going to shock the world and always talking about all these game-changing situations, there was a Gerald Celente interview. I didn't listen to it because I didn't need to hear. It said they finally realizing, well, they didn't say this, but I'm recognizing that they finally realized that good for gold angle is that China has massive debt issues. And the headline was, China panic, 250% debt to GDP and a staggering $30 trillion of debt. So now they finally realize there's a new story out there that might shock the world. And there's Dizzy Miss Lizzie. She's going to fight, fight, fight. She's always fighting. You didn't build that. Now, the other thing I didn't mention when we discussed the travel ban. One of the things that the left has been doing is forum shopping decisions or presidential actions by going to a district court where they know they have an Obama appointee or a court that's sympathetic to their point of view. So when Trump signed his travel ban, which the 5-4 majority showed clearly he had the right to do it, the statute says that the president can keep out a class of aliens as he deems necessary, and that's what his travel ban did. Well, the Ninth Circuit said, no, we can't. Justice Justice Clarence Thomas, when he agreed with the court that Trump was within his constitutional rights to issue that travel ban, also wrote a long opinion, fairly long, saying that, look, this type of forum shopping and having a district court judge strike down nationally, universally, a presidential order is not constitutional. Now, what he wrote is called dicta, and it's not binding. But he's basically inviting someone to challenge withstanding the next time this happens, whether a district court judge can actually act on behalf of the whole country and make a ruling. Because remember, the district courts are like the Federal Reserve banks. They're dotted across the country. There's 9 circuits, I believe. I think there's 12 Federal Reserve banks, but don't call me on that. But a district court is supposed to handle the issues that occur within its region. And what happens generally is the things that go to the Supreme Court, the way the Supreme Court likes to hear issues is there may be what's called a split in the circuits. So a 5th Court circuit judge may say that when you deal with hiring and firing decisions based on whether someone's a Republican or Democrat, the 5th Circuit might say, well, you can do that up to a point. The 9th Circuit may say you can never do that. So now there's a split in the circuits. So what the Supreme Court will do is they will take the case to clear up. There's some inconsistencies in the way the law of the land is. There's a different rule in the 9th Circuit and there's a different rule in the 5th Circuit, so the Supreme Court will hear it. But when the 3rd or 5th Circuit says it's okay to do something and the 9th Circuit says it isn't, they don't say when the 5th Circuit makes the rule, and therefore all across the country it's not okay. They're only ruling for their area. But when these justices get forum shopped for things that Trump does and they try to strike it down for the country, Clarence Thomas is saying that might not be constitutional, and he's probably right, because there's nothing in the Constitution that gives district court judges that power. So as we mentioned, gold down during the week. So was silver. Just some more news. I've been talking about the new petrodollar backed by U.S. oil. Well, U.S. crude oil exports surged to another record 3 million barrels per day last week. Look at that chart. And that is something that means if you need a petrodollar, it can be backed by Saudi oil and by U.S. oil. It often is. And there you go. So much for China crushing the dollar. Boom, up goes the dollar versus the Chinese RMB or yuan. So the petro yuan. Now the other thing is, not only is the United States becoming a major oil exporter to back the dollar, but Saudi Arabia seems to be falling in line with President Trump's request to pump more oil. Now they disputed what he wrote here, that they may increase production up to 2 million barrels per day, but they did say that they would do what they need to do. So I don't think you have the end of the petrodollar, the dying petrodollar. In fact, you have a bigger petrodollar now that it's backed by Saudi oil and U.S. oil. And looks like the tariffs are still going through their battle phase. We'll see where it all pans out. My prediction is, and Trump has said the same, the idea isn't to place tariffs. The idea is to lower barriers reciprocally across the board and even to maybe eliminate many of them. So we'll see if that practice or this tactic works. And big smack in the face for Donald Trump. Harley Davidson decided that they're going to move, because of the tariffs that Europe are going to put on their bikes, they're going to move production over there. Now that makes sense. Why does it make sense? Trump is telling the Europeans, don't ship your cars over here. Build them here. Give us jobs. Well, you can't expect, if you want to be reciprocal, you can't expect Harley Davidson to want to pay the tax over, to export. They're going to want to just build there and avoid the export and avoid the tariff. So what should happen in all this is countries should build in each other's countries and produce there and sell there. And if there's things that they can't produce in country, they don't want to spend the money or the time to do it, and they want to ship, well, then there should be lower or no tariffs so you can have really good free trade. So this is all just, I think, the way the pieces are being shuffled for the ultimate settlement. Now, what Krugman doesnn't understand, he's supposedly an economist, but he's basically saying there's a lot of other businesses that are going to move over there. But the other benefit, I think it's actually a good thing that Harley Davidson is going over there, because they're going to ship their cash back, and Trump has removed the tax on that. But again, if he expects the Europeans, the Germans to build, the Italians to build their cars in the United States, well, then why wouldn't you expect? It's more convenient. Why do you want to get a Harley Davidson shipped, carbon footprint and all that, if you can build it in Frankfurt and ship it from there? Why ship it from the United States? Well, you want the U.S. job. Well, now he's going against his idea that this isn't about barriers. He's saying he wants free trade. Well, free trade makes sense. You should always build your product as close to your customer as you can, unless there's labor cost issues, which there may be. I don't know. But he's saying a Harley Davidson should never be built in another country. Never. That doesn't. But he wants the Germans to build Mercedes-Benz in the United States. Their employees and customers are already very angry with them. Well, I think if they sell their cars, their motorcycles to Americans, made in America, good for them. If they want to sell motorcycles to Europeans, made in Europe, good for them too. All right, I think that he'll actually realize that that's the natural reaction that people are going to make, and that's probably a good thing, that both sides should be building factories in each other's countries for products for which they've already established a demand for, but then also reduce tariffs or eliminate tariffs between the countries. I think you're going to get there. Now, another one does this, another motorcycle maker, which is probably of no consequence. The name is Polaris. I never heard of them. That doesn't mean that they're not popular, but I don't think that they are. All right, so a lot of stories about China not really doing well. They had a very bad month For the yuan, they had a very bad month for the stock exchange, down 20%. Game changer. Yuan falls to lowest level of 2018, longest losing streak in 2 years. What's interesting is the yuan started to fall just when they launched the game changer gold-backed yuan, exchangeable on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, all that nonsense about the petro yuan, and well, we've seen what's happened. All these charts are showing you down, down, down. All right, enough on China. We've covered China all week. We're going to blow by all this China stuff, but we've covered this. If you're interested, the tweets are interesting. They've been covered in other videos during the week about their gold position. China to crush the dollar. China has gold. Yeah, the yuan is still going down. Yeah, China's smart because they have gold. Game changer. Look at it. There you go. Boom. Down it goes. Gold back yuan. And gold's gone down too since the launch of the game changer yuan denominated oils futures contract. And they have a Chinese think tank warning of potential financial panic in leaked note. So China is clear, as far as I can tell. China is in a much more dire, potential dire situation than the United States is, and the dollar. People don't think that way. They've been taught to believe that China has got everything and the United States has nothing. That's just listening to YouTube and not doing any independent research. And when you listen to YouTube, you have to remember, most people on YouTube don't do independent analysis. They parrot what they hear, they repeat it as fact, and then there are thousands and tens and thousands and even hundreds of thousands of viewers repeat it across the channels and comments, and then everyone thinks that that's a fact. Whatever fact they might have heard in the first instance, and the second and the third, and they've probably heard it 20 times, and then they just believe it. And when they hear something that goes counter to that, they're like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay. They make the assumption just because they've heard something 10 times, now they know what they're talking about because the person they heard it from somehow knows what they're talking about because 8 other people said the same thing. It's not really logic. Alright, so there's all your Chinese stuff. Very bad week for them. Multipolar world, game changer, China to crush the dollar, gold back yuan, gold 50,000. Alright, Sun Tzu, all that stuff. Alright, that's about it for the week. There weren't many gold finds, silver finds. There's that cryptocurrency story. We did a whole article on that. We did a live stream on how this Silicon Valley jewelry store was accepting cryptocurrencies and actually sold more gold and silver jewelry using cryptocurrencies than they did credit cards. And the rationale there for them was that it was cheaper. The fees were cheaper on the cryptocurrencies than the credit cards. So they're able to lower the price a bit and pass along some of the savings. And that is a use case for Bitcoin and Litecoin, that it's cheaper to use. And it's also a case for a booming economy, or at least a booming small ecosystem like cryptocurrencies that drives demand into gold and silver, not necessarily for investment demand, but for jewelry. All right. And let's see if there's anything else here. That's about it. There was some movement on atomic swaps and lightning networks, but other than that, you could just scroll through and see some of the other things that happened during the week. Oh, here's one we never heard before in the gold pumper. Bill Holter, the system is going to go down. Oh, I never heard that before. Here's a legend says gold market to hit new all-time highs over 2,000. So, but I like the fact that they're now saying China panicked, 250,000% debt GDP and a staggering 30 trillion of debt. That's the new gold pump story. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. Some finds here. You could check them out. I'm not going to go through them. Again, Salivate Metal, I sent a lot of stuff to him and he gets his own stuff. He covers a lot of good gold finds. He also covers numismatics and different issuances of gold and silver coins, something I don't do. He does a very good job of that, so check it out. All right, well, thank you very much for listening, and please sure to tune in every night at 8 o'clock on YouTube, where we do a live, interactive live stream. Get to ask questions, and thank you very much, and have a good night.